Today's daf we're going to be learning a Sanhedrin daf Kufyud. Shabbat Tov to everyone. Today's daf is sponsored by Abby Slasland in loving memory of Rabbi Henry Sasland. He taught us that daily learning can be the ultimate source of comfort and sipuk nefesh. Today's daf is sponsored by the Hadran women of Long Island in honor of our friend and co-learner Bracha Ratner, whose completion of Masechet Sanhedrin marks her siyum on all of Shas. You dedicated the last 7.5 years to this monumental achievement. We are so proud that you're one of our group and that we're able to share in your simcha. L'chi Mechael Alchai. Mazal Tov Bracha. Okay, we're going to get started, which reminds me to just remind you all to register for the SEAM if you haven't yet. I know it's not a great time, but if you can't come on live, then just at least make sure to listen on your own time. It's the benefit of everything being recorded. And with that, we're going to get started. Okay, today's class starts out with the women, the importance of women in men's lives. So we started with Ben Pellet and how his wife saved his life. That was yesterday. Now we're going to get to the fact that the wife of Korach is the one who caused him to start the whole thing in the first place. And this whole thing was her idea. So we're going to get started now with the second line of our daf. Itate de Korach Amrele. The wife of Korach said to him, Chaze my kavid Moshe. Don't you see what Moshe is doing? You have a malka. He made himself the king. La'achu Shavi Akana Rabba. He made his brother the Kohen Gadol. That's what we call nepotism. Livnei achu Shavinu Sgane de Kahane. His nephews he made into the second in command to the Kohen. Eat at truma and pay attention. If there's truma, right? In other words, you have to give to the Kohen. Amar tehavi the Kohen. He says, right? The truma goes to the Kohen. Iate maser. If you give 1/10 of your produce to the Levi, which now remember, Korach's a Levi, so that's supposed to go to you. But deshkilu atun, you're collecting that. But Amar havu chameser al the Kohen. But 1/10 of that, that's called trumat maser, has to be given to the Kohen as well. So even the part that you get, you have to give part to the Kohen. Each time, Moshe is just trying to get stuff for his family members. Ve'od. The section in Bamidbar where it talks about what happened when they replaced the Bechorim with the Levites. Because originally the Bechorim were supposed to be the ones serving in the temple. It became the Levites. Again, there's the Kohanim and there's the Leviim with different jobs, but they did a switch. And one thing they did was they shaved all the hair of the Levites. So she says to him, Oh, the guys, they shaved all your hair. Umatala lechu ki kuftan. They made you look like dung, like they treated you like dung, basically. Ein a yad b'mazaychu. This is a weird one, but Moshe obviously wanted your hair, which I think really means the way that, not I think, the commentaries say what it really means is Moshe wanted you to be humiliated by shaving off your hair, and this is all the way of Moshe humiliating you. So Amrla, now Korach, actually, according to this version of the story, wasn't really convinced by her and actually tries to argue against her, particularly on the last issue. He says, but Moshe was also a Levite. He also had to shave all his hair. So this isn't, right? It wasn't just for us. He was humiliating only us. He was humiliating himself as well. So you can't say that was an issue against Moshe. Amrle, she says to him, yes, I can. Kevan de kulu revuta dide, since in the end, all he wanted was his own greatness. Amar, iunami, he said also, tamut nafshi plishtim. I don't mind bringing myself down with the Plishtim. This is a quote from Shimshon, which obviously was a story that didn't happen yet, right? So she's not exactly quoting this, but the story is saying what she's basically saying is the same way Shimshon, when he brought down the building and basically killed himself with the Plishtim, he was willing to die because it was so important to him to bring down the Plishtim. Also, it was so important to Moshe to bring you down that he was willing to do it himself just so that in the end he could have greatness. Ve'od. And furthermore, okay, so that was her first claim. The next thing, and that comes from the words, right? Madua titnasua, right? We're all kahal kadosh, and why are you making yourselves leaders? And the next thing is the tchelet, which her argument was like this. They said to you to put tchelet in your tzitzit. If they think tchelet is so important, you should make cloaks, take out your clothes. Afik means to take out, but it's unclear exactly how this sentence reads. But you should take out your cloaks and make them completely tchelet, meaning maybe even take out everything else. If tchelet is so respectful, right, and remember it's supposed to be also like the color of royalty, then you should be wearing complete clothing in tchelet. And the reason Moshe is not letting you do that is because he doesn't want you to look better than he is. And give you, he wants to again bring you down and not make you completely looking like in a completely respectful manner. Hainu dichtiv. So now that we finished this section, explains a pasuk in Mishlei. Chachmot nashim banta beita. The wisdom of women built the house. Zo ishto shel ben Peled. That she basically saved her household by convincing her husband. That was her wisdom. V'ivelet biyadeha tahar sena. But foolishness in her hand, really meaning, right, a woman who is foolish can destroy a house, and zo ishto shel Korach. And that's Korach's wife, who was destroyed by, right, she destroyed him basically and destroyed their household. Even though we're going to see the sons don't die, but Korach did. And today we're going to get to how did he die, and there's a big debate about how he died. You have to really read the rest of the pasuk. So now they come up against Moshe and people from Bnei Israel, 250 of them. Okay, they're called Nisi'ei Edah, the heads of groups, sort of thing, exactly, princes of the community, Kri'ei Moed. Okay, it's hard to translate this language, and that's what the Gemara is going to try to do, which is, right, they call out the holidays, maybe something, I don't know, it's not a real way to describe people, and shame people with a name. So what does this mean? You might already know what calling out a holiday means. So we'll get to that in a minute. So, Nisi'ei Edah, even though it's missing those words in the text, it should say it. Miyuchadim Sheba'edah. They were unique people. These weren't just anybody's. These were prominent people in the community who went up and joined Korach and went up against Moshe. Kri'ei Moed, Shem Yodim La'aber Shanim U'Likbo Chodeshim, brings us back to the beginning of our Masechet. They know when to do, right? These are the people sitting in the Sanhedrin who know how to determine when there's a new month, when there's a leap year, when there's an extra day in the month, or not an extra day in the month. And that's why they're Kri'ei Moed, because they're the ones who determine the holidays. Anshe Shem, Shayalem Shem B'chol HaOlam. Okay, this might be a bit of an exaggeration, but they had a name, a reputation in the whole world. Okay, these were people with reputations. Vayishma Moshe v'yipol panav. Okay, now we have a strange pasuk, and you might not realize it's so strange, but right before this, it says that they come up against Moshe and Aharon. And then it says, and Moshe fell on his face. Like he was very upset, he fell on his face. Why only Moshe? Why not Aharon? So they assume, and it also says, Vayishma Moshe, Moshe heard, which we assume he heard whatever they were saying. But now we're going to have to say Moshe must have heard something that related to him and not to Aharon, and that's why only Moshe fell on his face. So what could that be? And we're going to see in another minute where they get it from. Mashmu Ashama, what did he hear? Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, shechashaduhu me'eshet ish. They suspected Moshe, they were spreading rumors about him, or they suspected him of having engaged in relations with married women. Shenemar, now where do we get this from? Well, it comes from Tehillim. First place we get it from, by the way, or one place, I don't know, it doesn't matter, first or second, really first is going to be this allusion to it in some pasuk in Tehillim. Before we get to there, remember that Moshe separates from his wife. So anyone who's separated from their wife, right, there's a big question like, well, what? Right, there was basically these people are saying, what, he's not engaging in relations with anyone, so maybe he's engaging in relations with our wives. Now here's the allusion to this in the pasuk. In Tehillim, in chapter 106, Kuf Vav, it basically talks about, but that it's talking about, it gives a description of a bunch of things that happened in the desert. And when it gets to this story, it says, Vayikan'u leMoshe b'machaneh. Okay, it says they were jealous of Moshe in the camp. Now, jealous, okay, that's the way we usually think of the Korach story. But kin'ah is also a term used by husbands and wives, and particularly in the Sota, right? The husband is mekaneh b'ishto. So they assume here, and b'machaneh in the camp, which is often where you're sleeping. So they learn from there that this is an allusion to the fact that perhaps they were suspect of Moshe engaging in relations with their wives. And Amar Shmuel bar Yitzchak, everybody suspected their wife and said to them, right, this basically goes back to the Sota terminology, and said, don't go into a room alone with Moshe. They were all worried that their wives were sleeping with Moshe. Shene'emar. Now, here's a hard way to understand how this pasuk proves it. So many people interpret this. Okay, this is a pasuk you have to understand where it comes from in the section about Chet HaEgel. Okay, so back in Shemot, and presumably this happened earlier, right, than the Korach story, which doesn't make so much sense. But the claim is that Moshe then took his oil and took it out of the camp, and then they stopped suspecting him. That's why he moved out of the camp, according to this. But most people say, no, it doesn't make sense because this happened before. Some people say, oh, because his tent was out of the camp, that's what caused them to suspect, because then he could be secluded with a woman because he was out of the camp where there weren't a lot of people, and that caused the reason for the suspicion. That makes a little more sense chronologically. Vayakam Moshe v'yelech ad Datan and Aviram. Now Moshe goes to the Datan and Aviram, basically, like he wants to say, you should stop doing this, stop, he goes to basically make peace, to reconcile. So Amar Reish Lakish mikan she'em machzikim b'machloket. Okay, from here we learn, really, they should have apologized to him, but he goes out to seek them, and even though he's not successful, but he goes out to try to make peace. And therefore, what do we learn from here? You shouldn't, right? There's an issue here. You shouldn't engage and stay in a quarrel with someone. You should try to get out of it. The Amarav, as Rav says, kol machzik b'machloket over belav. Anyone who does this and stays in a machloket actually transgresses a negative prohibition. Shenemar v'lo yeh kekorach v'chadato. Okay, that's in the end of the section there. It says, right, this will be a remembrance to the Jewish people that people should not be like Korach v'chadato, like Korach and his groupies. Ka'asher diber Hashem. I want you to pay attention to this because in a minute we're going to darshan it. As God spoke, biyad Moshe lo. Okay, as God spoke through Moses. Okay. But biyad, we're going to translate as a hand, and we're going to connect it to a different hand, and we're going to say something else about this in one more minute. There's an interesting machlok at Ramban and the Rambam, whether this is counted as one of the 630 mitzvot or not, which is interesting in and of itself. Rav Ashi amar ru'oi litztareh. Rav Ashi says if you keep a quarrel going on, you don't try to resolve it, you get leprosy. How do we know this? From Gzera Shava, from two words. Biyad Moshe, again, the same word appearing in two different places. Biyad Moshe lo, the biyad here appearing in the hand of Moshe. Uchtiv ha'atam vayomer Hashem lo, in the beginning of the Pesach story, what happens when Moshe goes to the Jewish people? God says to him, Od havena yadcha b'chleikecha, put your hand in your bosom and take it out, and it's going to be leprous. So there we have. The yad is associated with leprosy. So also here, b'yad Moshe, don't be like Korach v'chadato, and if you are, and you engage in a quarrel and you don't try to resolve it, you're going to end up with leprosy. Apropos that same topic, but now taking it somewhere else, Amar Rabbi Yossi, kol hacholek al malchut David ra'oi lakishon nachash. If you go against a king from the Davidic dynasty, you should get bitten by a snake. Okay, or you're deserving of that. How do we get to that? Well, Ktiv Hatam b'Yizbach Adoniyahu. Remember Adoniyahu, the son of David, who when Shlomo was supposed to take over when David is dying, right? He basically rebels, and so he goes against a Davidic king. And what does it say? V'Yizbach Adoniyahu tzonu bakar u'mari im even hazochelet. So he sacrifices tzon bakar and animals with this stone hazochelet. What on earth is the stone hazochelet? Tiv Hatam, in a different pasuk, it says, Im chamatz ochalei afar. So there it says, ochalei afar, creepy crawlers like snakes. Zochelet must be snakes. So there we say, Adoniyahu should have gotten bitten by a snake. Amar Rav Chisda. Now we're going to learn some other things from Korach, and we're going to say the similar type thing using different words each time, but different psukim. Anyone who goes against his rabbi, his teacher, goes against the Shechina. Okay, it's as if they're arguing against God. Shneimar batzotam al Hashem. Okay, but as it says in their fight, right, against God, it wasn't really against God; it was against Moshe. But going against Moshe was like going against God. Amar Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, the second statement like this: Kolosem mirivaim rabo. If you make a quarrel with your rabbi, your teacher, kosem hashchina. It's like you're doing it with the Shechina, with the divine presence. Shneimar hema miriva sheravu b'nei Israel et Hashem. Okay, these are the waters, the bitter waters. When the people complain, right? They complained to Moshe, but it was like they were complaining to God. Amar Rabbi Chanina bar Papa, kol mitra'em al rabo. Okay, so we have kol cholek who disagrees. Osem miriva makes a quarrel. Again, they're all very similar words. Mitra'em is to complain against al rabo, to his teacher. Ki'ilu mitra'em al hashchina. Shneimar lo alenu tlunatchem ki al Hashem. Okay, your complaints aren't to us; they're really to God. Amar Rabbi Avao, kol amar herach harabo. If you have doubt in your rabbi, ki'ilu mar herach harshchina. If you have doubt against God, that was the fourth statement, and the last one, shneimar v'daber ha'am Elohim u'v'Moshe. They spoke about God and about Moshe. Okay, so again, God is always included here when they go against Moshe. Osher shamor leba'alav l'ra'ato. Okay, here's a pasuk that it's a pasuk from Kohelet. Yeah, Kohelet. Okay, yesh ra'at chola ra'iti tachat hashemesh, right? There's something like bad sickness that I see, that osher shamor leba'alav l'ra'ato, that wealth is found for those who are bad. So what do we say about this? Amar Reish Lakish, zeu shrosh Korach. This is the wealth of Korach. Okay, that just one second. Okay. So this is the wealth of Korach. We're now going to say that Korach was super, super wealthy. Okay. Okay, what are we talking about here? This is when the people get swallowed up in the ground. It says, Asher Asala Datan. It's actually describing this later in Sefer Devarim. It says, Asher Asala Datan Aviram, Bnei Eliab ben Reuven, Asher Patzar, it's a Pia. This is what they did to Datan and Aviram, and the sons of Reuven. Asher Patzar, it's a Pia. The ground swallowed them up. It swallowed them up, their houses. Et oalehem, their tents. Ve'et kol hayakum asher baraglehem. What is kol hayakum asher baraglehem? How do we translate that pasuk? That is mamono shel adam, Rabbi Elazar says. Shema mido araglav. Yakum is, it helps you stand, right? Yakum asher baraglehem means things that help you stand on your feet, which is money. Money helps you stand on your feet, and the money was what was swallowed up in the ground. Okay, so basically what we're saying is Korach had all this money, and as did maybe the other people with him, and all their money was swallowed up in the ground. But Amar Rabbi Levi, Masui, now we're going to have a very exaggerated description of how wealthy he was. He had Masui shlosh me'ot pradot levanot. Okay, 300 white mules were needed to carry what? Hayu maftechot shel beitin hazav shel Korach. Just the keys for his storehouses of all of his treasures. Vikulu aklide vikilfe, all of his locks and right, what do you call them? The keys and the locks, all of them were de gilda. They were all made of leather. Okay, usually they're made of metal, heavy, right? These were all made of leather, and yet they still weighed so much. They had to be carried by 300 white mules. I don't know why white specifically, but they had to be carried by tons of mules. And Amar Rabbi Chama Rabbi Chanina, Shalosh Matmaniyot. Now the question is really, how did he get so wealthy? Right? Where was their wealth in the desert? Well, remember, Yosef was very wealthy from being in Egypt. So he had 3 treasures. Hitmin Yosef b'Mitzrayim, he hid in Egypt. Echad nitgalta leKorach, one was revealed to Korach. Echad nitgalta leAntoninus ben Asvirus, who was a Roman emperor who was friends with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. And Echad gnuzal tzadikim la'atid lavo, and one is saved for tzadikim for the future. Okay, what to make of this, I'm not really sure. But in any case, it's an interesting midrash. You can try to think about what the connection of those 3 people are. Okay, keeping on. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Korach lo min habluim v'lo min hasrufim. The first opinion thinks Korach wasn't swallowed up in the ground, and he wasn't burned. What happened then to him? Well, the next day there's a magefa, there's a plague, and all these people die in the plague, like thousands of people, as opposed to the 250 people who were burned, because they were the ones who offered the incense, and there were the other people like Datan and Aviram and all those who were swallowed up. Right? We always think Korach was swallowed up. According to this opinion, he wasn't swallowed up. So let's see why. We're going to have 2 different readings of the same pasuk. Lo min habluim daktiv ve'et kol adam asher leKorach. All the people that were with Korach. But notice, below Korach, right? That sounds like everyone who was with Korach, but not Korach himself. Below min hasrufim daktiv ve'echol ha'eshet 50 u200 ish. Now remember, there was Korach, there was Datan and Aviram, and there were, and then there were the 250 people. He wasn't part of the 250 in the count, right? Below Korach. So he was excluded both from that and from that. But in a different Braita it says, Korach min, this was Rabbi Yochanan, but in a Braita it says, Korach min hasrufim u'min habluim. He was actually both. Both things happened to him, the opposite opinion. Min habluim dechtiv tivla otam ve'et Korach. Okay, now let's read the pasuk a little more carefully. So it says here, Vatiftach aretz et pia, so the ground opened its mouth. Vativla otam, it swallowed them, which we said before, otam, but not Korach. But then it says, Ve'et Korach b'mot ha'ida, ve'echol ha'esh et 50 u200 ish. So it's very weird with that, Ve'et Korach b'mot ha'ida, and Korach with the death of the people, and when the fire swallowed the 250 people. So one opinion says, oh yeah, et Korach is separate. One says, no, vayivla otam ve'et Korach. And you read it like that. You don't take a break and then say, and Korach ba'da, right, b'mot ha'ida, but it's then and Korach. Okay, so it really depends where you put a comma in that pasuk. Okay, well, how about minas rufim? Where do you get it? Same pasuk as before. What did we say? The 250 doesn't include Korach. Obviously, this opinion says, what do you mean? Korach ba'dayu, and obviously Korach was with them. Okay, this is not really proving from the pasuk or not. It's just, was Korach part of that or was he not part of that? Right? So one is just obvious he was. Amar Rabba, my dichtiv, shemesh yereach hamad zvla leor chitzecha yalechu. Okay, now we're in a pasuk in Chavkuk. We're taking this out of context, but we're going to connect this to the Korach story. This means that the shemesh and the yereach stood in zvula. Zvula is one of the firmaments in the heavens. Leor chitzecha yalechu, and they go by the arrows of God. What does this have to do with anything? Well, milamed she'alu shemesh v'yereach lizvul. The sun and the moon went up to Zvul, to this firmament up in the heavens, and said, Amru l'fanav ribono shel olam. They go to say to God, Im atau sedin leben amram netzeh. If you bring justice to Moshe, like what on earth is going on with the Korach and his people? Either do justice to Moshe, and then we'll go out. Basically, it was like the first strike. We're striking. We're not coming out. We're not shining this morning. And im lav, right, lo netzeh. If not, we're not going out. So if you resolve this quickly, we'll go out. But if not, we're not going out to shine today. God shot arrows at them and Amar Lahem and said, no, you're leaving. Okay, there's no protesting today. There's no strikes. Amar Lahem b'chvodi lo machitem, b'chvod basar v'adam machitem. When people are disrespecting me, you didn't complain. But when they're disrespecting a human like Moshe, you're complaining. That's not appropriate. What? Why? When are they disrespecting God? We talked about this. Every morning, the kings go out and bow down to the sun. So every morning the sun comes out, people are bowing to the sun and disrespecting God, and yet you come out every single day. So why would you come out every single day and then not come out for Moshe? That's not appropriate. So God got angry at them. Now they say, and now, once God said that, they realize you're right, we shouldn't come out and shine every day because of that. So they stopped. And the only reason they come out every morning, and when the moon rises and when the sun rises, is always because of God is shooting arrows at them. And that's why it says, L'or chitzecha, let's see, find the pasuk again, L'or chitzecha yahalechu. They will go based on God's arrows, because otherwise they would never come out. Darash Rabba, my dichtiv v'im bria yivra Hashem u'patzta haaretz et ha'adama et pia. Okay, this is a pasuk that in Bamidbar there, where in the Korach story, Moshe says, if bria yivra Hashem, if God will create this, then the ground should open up and swallow them. So now they say, okay, well, what does this mean? What is God creating? So they say, Amar Moshe lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe said to God, Im bria Gehenom, if Gehenom is created, mutav, great, then swallow them up and bring them down to the depths of Gehenom, of hell. V'im bria yivra Hashem, v'im lav yivra Hashem, and if not, create Gehenom, like now is the time, create it. So lemai, now they say, what is this talking about? If we're talking about really creating Gehenom right now, there's nothing new under the sun. From Kohelet, obviously it was created already. There's no way God was creating Gehenom then. What he meant is, if there's no opening to Gehenom here, create it right now. Okay, but not actually creating Gehenom. Pasuk in the Torah says, "Ubnei Korach lo metu." Okay, this is later when they're recounting the genealogy. They say, and the sons of Korach didn't die. So that's like a clear thing here. Tana mishum Rabbeinu amru makom nitbatzer lem beGehenom v'yashvu alav amru shira. Why? What happened? They went down to Gehenom, but God created this high area for them. And in other words, usually you're down in the depths of Gehenom, and they sat there in that high area where they weren't kind of swallowed up in Gehenom, and they said shira to God. They recognized God, okay, like doing tshuva, and therefore they weren't killed. Or they didn't end up in Gehenom. Amarabba bar Chana. Zimna chada hava azilna ba'orcha. This actually, we heard this story before in Baba Batra. It was with a series of stories of Rabbi Bar Chana, who meets an Arab merchant, and the Arab merchant offers him to see all sorts of interesting things that happened in our history. So now we're just quoting the Korach story. Amar li ha'utaya. So I was traveling. I met a merchant. Tava achvele beluei de Korach. This Arab merchant said to me, "Would you like to see the people swallowed up by Korach?" In the Korach story, so he showed me two holes in the ground where smoke was coming up. Shakal Gavava da Amri, he took a wad of wool. Maya, he soaked it, waterlogged it. Ve'otve bereish rumcha, stick it on the edge of a spear. Ve'achlafe hatam, and he put it right there where the smoke was coming out. Ichrach, and even though it was waterlogged, it immediately burned on fire, singed. Amarle atzit mashama. He said, "Listen, what do you hear?" The Shamed, and what I heard is they were saying the following: Moshe Torah toemet vehein badaim. Moshe and his Torah is true, and they, meaning themselves, are badaim. They don't know anything. Okay, we're foolish people, right? We're people who don't understand anything. So now the Arab merchant explains to him, turning now to Amabet, Amal kotaltin yomin mahadra lehu gehenom kebasar betoch halachat. Every 30 days, they return them to Gehenom like meat in a pot, and they get stirred up again and boiled up. That's why it's so hot there. And they say the following: Moshe and they basically, admit to the truth of the situation. Okay, that's the end of the Korach story. Now we're going to move into Dor Hamidbar. Okay, we have two sections to deal with today. From here, we have the Dor Hamidbar, the people who lived in the desert, and then we have the 10 tribes is the next Mishnah. So here we're still on our previous Mishnah, Dor Hamidbar Elam Chelek Lo'olam Haba, the generation of the desert. And we saw Machloket in the Mishnah. We're going to see the same Machloket now in a Braita. Tanu Rabbanan, Dor Midbar ein lem chelek leolam haba, shene'emar b'midbar hazeh yitamu v'sham yamutu, yitamu ba'olam hazeh, sham yamutu ba'olam haba. Okay, they'll be completely wiped out and they'll die. So why two languages? One in this world, one in the next. That's the theme we've been seeing all throughout here. Ve'omar, but here's another pasuk. Asher nishbati ba'api imivu'uno menuchati, divrei Rabbi Akiva. Okay, so this is all Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says another pasuk. We say it in Friday night davening, in the first on L'chun Ranana. It says, Arba'im Shana Kupador, the 40 years in the desert it's talking about. And then it says, where I swore in my anger, you will not come to Minucha, right, to rest, which means final resting in the Olam Haba. That's Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Eliezer, of course they get to Olam Haba, and we saw this also before, Shnema, Isfuli Chasidai Kortei Briti Ale Zavach. What does that mean? Who are the Chasidai, right? Gather to me my pious ones. Why are they pious? Because God remembers the chesed of your youth. When you follow me into the desert, that shows that they were chasidim, and they were kortei brit alei zavach, because they offered sacrifices when they got the brit at Matan Torah, right, when they received the Torah. So therefore, obviously, they get a place with God. It says it's fully chasidai. That's obviously talking about, well, I should say obvious. We'll see in a minute, maybe not. But right now, we're going to say that pasuk is talking about the generation of the desert. Okay, God swore in his anger that he wasn't going to bring you to Menucha. So what is that about? God swore in anger, but then changed his mind about it, right? And that kind of fits with what we saw previously, that the moment of anger of God is momentary, right? It's very quick. It's like one quick minute, and God doesn't stay angry for long. Rabbi Yeshua ben Korchomer, another explanation. Now he's going to come, according to Rabbi Akiva, and explain, or at least according to Rabbi Akiva's approach, what do you do with the pasuk Isfuli Chasidai and Kortei Briti Ale Zavach, that they're going to be collected? And didn't we say it's the Dor Midbar? Well, no. Lo ne'amar pasuk zeh ele keneged dorot habaim. It was talking about later generations. Isfuli Chasidai elu tzadikim shebachol dor v'dor. Chasidim are just what regular Chasidim, pious people who live, the righteous people who live in every generation. Kortei Briti, Elu Hananya, Mishael, Vazarya, Shemasur Asmam L'Tokiv Shana Esh. Right? These are the people who kept my covenant. They were willing not to worship idols and get thrown into a fiery furnace. And Alei Zavach, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva v'Chaverav, Shemasur Atzmam L'Shchita Al Divrei Torah. These are what we call the 10 martyrs, right? Whether they were 10 or a different amount, but they were the martyrs in the time of the Roman time period where they were all killed in horrible ways, and they basically sacrificed their lives for Torah. That's Alei Zavach, like sacrifices, right? So they sacrificed their lives over Torah. Rabbi Shimon ben Menashe Omer, Ba'in hein la'olam haba. Here's the other interpretation, right? They do get to olam haba, shene'emar, ufduyei Hashem yishuvun uva'u tzion b'rina. Who are the pduyei Hashem? Those who are redeemed by God. Oh, it doesn't mean, the way we usually read this pasuk is, those who will be redeemed by God will come back, and they will come back to Zion. But what he's explaining is, those who were redeemed by God in Egypt will be returned in the future, meaning who got redeemed in Egypt? People who lived in the generation of the desert. So the ones who were redeemed will come back to Zion, meaning they'll be returned, right? And they'll also have a part in Olam Haba. Amar Rabba Rabbi Yochanan. Now here comes his question, and we're going to have this question later in the next section as well. Shavka Rabbi Akiva lechasidute? Wait a minute. Rabbi Akiva is so harsh on the Jewish people here. He's not usually so harsh on them. This doesn't make any sense. Okay, they call him chasidute, like from his piety. But what it really means is, Rabbi Akiva is not really so harsh with the Jewish people usually. So why is he saying that they have no portion in the world to come? Right? Why is he going by the stringent position? And now they're going to quote a pasuk that he could have used to basically say the opposite. Now, we don't know why he thinks Rabbi Akiva is pious about these things and more lenient, so to speak, about saying people don't have a portion in the world to come, but we're going to get to that later in the daf. So right now we're just going to say Rabbi Akiva could have used this pasuk, Shene'emar, to basically go out to bat for the generation of the desert. Haloch v'karata b'oznei Yerushalayim lemor, go speak in the ears of Jerusalem to say. Now this is later, obviously, but right after the destruction of the temple, Zacharti la chesed ne'urayich, I remember to you the chesed of your youth, which is what? When they were in the desert. How do we know that? In a second, we're going to see. Ahavat klulotayich, right? The love of my beloved. Lechtech acharai b'midbar, that you follow me in the desert, be'eretz lo zurah, right? In a land that wasn't planted or anything, and you follow me blindly, right? Umachir. Now, this is basically saying Jerusalem will be returned in the merit of the people of the desert. So comes the Gemara and says, Uma Achirim, or Rabbi Yochanan is saying in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Akiva should have used this pasuk to come to the opposite conclusion. Ma Achirim ba'im b'zchutam, hem atzman lo koshken. If other people are going to be returned in their merit, then obviously they themselves are meritorious to be in the world to come. So it doesn't make any sense for two reasons. Number one, it doesn't fit with Rabbi Akiva in general, and number two, there's a pasuk that basically seems pretty clear that the people of the desert should have a place in the world to come. Next section, new Mishnah. Aseret Hashvatim, the 10 tribes who were basically exiled in the time of when Malchut Israel was taken by the Assyrians toward the end of Bayit Rishon, the first temple period. They were taken to Assyria. Now, there's a big debate here what this means by the 10 tribes. Does this mean, now we're going to see here, there's going to be two issues. The Mishnah is going to talk about Einam Atidin Lachzor. They're not going to come back to Israel. But the Gemara is going to talk about they also don't have a portion of the world to come. And they seem to be interrelated. The question is, do we mean just that generation? Notice it doesn't say Dor Aseret Hashvatim. And some people think it's just that generation because they were steeped in sin, right? We're talking about all the kings of Israel and how bad they were and how much they caused the people to sin, steeped in sin. Or is it saying, in general, the 10 tribes will never come back? Now, some of the 10 tribes, doesn't really mean everyone from the 10 tribes, either which way you look at it, because some of them ended up moving to the Judean camp, and those people obviously survived. So we're only talking about the people from the 10 tribes that were exiled, and within that, we might only be talking about that generation. Unclear. So Aseret Hashvatim einam atidin lachzor. They're not going to come back. Shene'emar v'yishlachem al eretz acheret kayom hazeh. Here's a fascinating debate about how to understand this pasuk. So they were sent to a different land like this day. Okay, that's what the pasuk says about them. So what does it mean like this day? What it means is like day. Okay, now what is day? What typifies day? Here we have two totally different approaches. We call it the pessimistic and the optimistic approach. Mahayom holech ve'eno chozel, af hem hochim ve'enam chozrim. Okay, just like the day goes and will never come back. You can't repeat a day, right? There's no such thing as redoing your day, even though many of us might like to sometimes redo a day. You can't do that, right? This is like the attitude of people who say, if I don't do this today, right, who knows what tomorrow will bring also. It's kind of like that attitude. Today, once today is gone, right, opportunities are gone. So so just like the day won't return, they're going to go and they will never come back. Okay, next. By the way, yeah, so I see someone pointed out in the chat, I should point it out as well. This is a pasuk from Devarim, okay? It's not actually there, but it's Vayitchem Hashem me'al admatam ba'afu b'chema b'ketzep gadol. God is going to take you off your land with a lot of anger, and will send them to a different land, and they claim that this is talking about the 10 tribes. Okay, so important to point that out. Thank you for putting it in the chat. Now, then the second interest, so that's Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Notice again, Rabbi Akiva is the harsh position. Rabbi Eliezer omer kayom hazeh. Ma hayom ma'afil ume'il. What happens every night? It gets dark, and then it gets light again the next day. Someone in the Hebrew class after class said to me, it's like Vayi Erev Vayi Boker, right? It starts at night, and then in the morning it's already light. So even though it's dark for them now, it will eventually be light for them. So here you have two very different approaches about how to view a day, and then obviously where to take it for the 10 tribes. Tanu Rabbanan. So now the Gemara starts with the Braita, again similar, but taking the Aseret Hashvatim, the 10 tribes, and talking more about the Aseret Hashvatim Ein Lem Chelek L'Olam Haba. Now going to Olam Haba. Shenema Vayitchem Hashem me'al admatam ba'afu b'chema b'ketzep gadol. That's our pasuk we saw before. Vayitchem Hashem me'al admatam ba'olam hazeh. Vayishlachem al eretz acheret l'olam haba. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. So again, saying, right, everybody understands this pasuk to be referring to the 10 tribes. It's just a matter of how you understand. And he says, again, two words, again saying olam hazeh and olam haba. Rabbi Shimon ben Yehuda ish Kfar Akka omer mishum Rabbi Shimon im asehem kayom hazeh einam chozrim. He understands kayom as differently. If they continue to act like they did on this day, they will be destroyed. They won't come back. Or they won't have a place in the world to come. But if not, they will be. Okay, or maybe they're even talking about Tchiya Metim. Rebbe Omer, Ba'im Hem LaOlam Haba. Shneimar, they will come to the Olam Haba. Shneimar, Bayom Ha'u Yitakah b'shofar gadol. And what does that pasuk say? Uvau Havdim Eretz Ashul, where the Ovdim Eretz Ashul. These are the 10 tribes because they come from Assyria. Now, usually we understand the pasuk to be talking about what we call kibbutz galuyot, that everyone's going to be the gathering of the exiles, and that's not in Olam Haba, right? That's in maybe Yemot Mashiach or around there, but it's not Olam Haba. But they understand it to mean Uvau Avdim, those who were lost, right, will have a place in the world to come. Amar Rabba Bar Chana again, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Shavka Rabbi Akiva Lachasidute. He's leaving his pious position where he's usually generally lenient with the people. Shenemal, and again, quoting a pasuk. It says, Haloch v'karata et hadberim ha'elu tzafona. Say this to the people in the north. Amarta shuva mishuva Yisrael. Shuva, they should return. They will return. Mishuva is like shovavim, the wild people of Israel. Neum Hashem. V'lo apil panai bachem ki chasidani neum Hashem lo ator lo olam. Okay, I won't fall on my face for them, meaning I'll be there with them, and I will not etor lo olam. Etor is like lo tikom v'lo titor, don't take revenge, right? God will not take revenge on them forever, and that sounds like they will be returned. So again, Rabbi Akiva could have used that pasuk. Why was he negative? My chasidute. So now we want to know, what is the chasidute of Rabbi Akiva in general. And now we're going to use a totally different topic, but it has to do with Olam Haba, but with something else entirely. But say, look at his position here, and therefore it doesn't make sense he took the harsh position on these two cases, right? Both on this one and on the previous about Dor Midbar. So now it says, K'tanei b'nei Rishei Yisrael ein ba'in la'olam haba. The children of bad people in Israel will not have a portion of the world to come. Okay, the children are punished, which is unfair, right? Shneimau, ki hinei hayom ba bo'er k'tanur. The day is going to come. It's hot like a furnace. Vayak kol zedin b'chol osei b'shah. Everyone who does bad things intentionally, kash. They'll be like straw. V'liheto tam hayom. Right? They're going to burn very quickly. Ba'hayom haba amar Hashem tzvaot asher lo ya'azov lehem shoresh v'anaf. This is the key part. They will not be left with a roots or a branch. Shoresh ba'olam hazeh, anaf lo'olam haba, divrei Rabban Gamliel, and that basically means children. Rabbi Akiva Omer, what do you mean? Ba'imem lo'olam haba, shneimar, shomer p'te'im Hashem. God protects the foolish. Now, what does that have to do with children? Well, sheken korim b'karchei hayam li'yenuka patya. The word patya is a word used for children, so it means God protects the children from their bad parents. V'omer, go to ilana, this is Rabbi Akiva, go to ilana v'chablua, cut your trees, Biram ikar sharashayu ba'arash fuku, but leave the roots in the ground, meaning the children will grow up, okay? Nothing will happen to them. Elamani mekayim lo yazov lem shorish va'anaf, so what do you do with that? Shelo yaniach lem lo mitzvah v'lo shiurei mitzvah. What it means is don't leave them any mitzvot that they didn't get rewarded for in this world, so that in the next world they can burn in hell. But nothing to do with children at all. Davar acher, a different interpretation, shorish zo neshama, anaf ze aguf. Don't leave them with a neshama, don't leave them with a body, don't leave them with anything, any way of returning back. Okay, but just as a side point, even though Rabbi Akiva disagrees about the Rishaim of the children of Rishaim of Israel and thinks they have a place in the world to come, which, by the way, was what led Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Rabbi Yochanan to ask all those questions, which we don't have an answer to. Why Rabbi Akiva is stringent there, but lenient here. But if they're children of Gentiles, who are evil Gentiles, they don't have a place in the world to come. Even Rabbi Akiva agrees. Rabbi Gamliel nafkalemi b'ta'abed kol zecher lamo. He learns his position from, it says, every memory will be wiped out of them. And that's about the Jews, and that's why even the Jews' children will be wiped out as well if they're bad. Now, our last thing for today. Itmar. Katam me'ematai ba'la olam haba. Fascinating question. How old do you have to be to get a portion of the world to come? We said all the Jews have a portion of the world to come, but how old? Like, what do you have to do to prove that you're worthy of a place in the world to come? I'm going to have a few different opinions, and with that, we'll finish. Rabbi Chia, Rabbi Shimon bar Rebbe. First, we start with 2. Chanamar misha'ashan olav, from the moment you're born. Chanamar misha'ashan siper, only when you start speaking. Until you start speaking, you really haven't done anything yet in the world. Mandamar misha'ashan olav shenemar, yavo v'yagidu tzikato la'am nolad ki asa. Okay, God will say his righteousness to the nation that is born because they did. What's a nation that's born? Every nation is born. Why are we different? Because we're born? So, we're different because when we're born, we already get a place in the world to come. That's God will do righteous with us. Righteousness. Umanda amar mishasha siper dechtiv zera yavdenu yisupar ladonai ledol. Okay, the zera that worships God, yisupar will speak Okay, and then they will be lidor. God will give them forever. Okay, that's kind of the way to read that pasuk. Itmar. Now there's a machloket about this pasuk. Ravina amar mishash nizra tichtiv zeri avdenu. From the time actually you're conceived, forget about being born. Even from the time of conception, you get a portion of the world to come because it says lidor. You'll have future. Rabbi Nachman Yitzchak amar mishash mol. You have a brit milah. Tichtiv ani v'govea minoar nasati emecha afuna. So I'm poor and from my youth, I'm already leading toward dying, but I kept your fear of God in me. So Tana Mishum Rabbi Meir, so that already means when is the fear of God in you? When you have your Brit Milah, and that's like a noticeable reminder of your fear of God. Tana Mishum Rabbi Meir, obviously, what does it do with women? Good question. Tana Mishum Rabbi Meir, last answer, Misha'ash Yomar Amen. When you say Amen, Shnamar Petchu Sharim V'Yavo Goy Tzadik Shomer Emunim. Okay, open the gates for the Shomer Amunim. What is Shomer Amunim? Al Tigrei Shomer Amunim, Ela Shomer Amen. Okay, and what is Amen? My Amen, Amar Rabbi Chanina El Melech Ne'eman. Not just speaking is enough. Okay, so we have a range from conception all the way to when you have enough sense to be able to say El Melech Ne'eman. God is a loyal king. Okay, that's the end of our daf. I don't really have so much time today, so we're going to do a very quick summary. We finished up, just go through the three main topics we did. The Korach story, started with the women, and then we got to all sorts of other topics within the Korach story, went to the generation of the desert, and then from there we got to the 10 tribes. We saw in those last two, big machloket between Rabbi Kiva and others, and then the question is, right, why Rabbi Kiva was so stringent when on this other case of the children of evil people, he wasn't. With that, we finish for today. Wishing everyone a Shavua Tov.